Hi everyone, it's time to solve another problem here on Homestead in the Woods. These windows over my right shoulder are terribly drafty, I think. The reason I think that is because these windows are for our master bathroom off of the bedroom. And in the winter, that bathroom gets 10 to 15 degrees colder than the bedroom itself. Not only is that a terrible waste of energy and efficiency, but it's just terribly uncomfortable. Middle of the night, nobody wants a cold bathroom, not even in the middle of the day. So I've got to remedy this problem. We've lived here with this problem long enough. I think it's because the windows are drafty now. I checked the windows, the seals are fine. I don't have compromised window seals, so I'm pretty confident with the integrity of the windows. It's just where we live, these windows being on the northwest corner of the house get an enormous amount of wind coming off of the lake. Now we took some trees down this summer as well, which is going to increase the volume of wind that comes into the corner of the house. And even though the seals are fine, these double glass or these double pane Anderson windows can only take so much, right? They can only keep so much out. So what I think the remedy here is to fit exteriorly some frames on these windows that will provide a third layer of protection from the wind. So my plan here is to get some wood, build some frames, and then attach a thick, heavy, clear, or maybe even opaque vinyl to the frames. And then I'll attach them to the exterior of the house around the windows. And that'll give me a third layer of protection from these heavy winds, which can hit the house at 30, 40, sometimes 50-mile-an-hour gusts in the winter, because there's nothing that stops the wind from rolling off the lake except just a few bare trees. So let's see how this project goes. I've got it pretty well figured out in my head. Let's get to work and start building frames and assembling materials. So see what I'm dealing with here. I've got plenty of space here on the side and about 3 inches here below. I haven't figured out yet how I'm going to attach my frames to the house because I don't want it to really compromise the wood. It's just going to be a wintertime installation, take it in and out. So I don't want to screw it in and have permanent holes there, especially if the screws come in and out every year. That's going to really gnarl these up here after a couple seasons. So I might be hanging some hooks at the very top, loop it over, and then have some turnbuckles here to cinch it up close to the frame. And then of course on the inside of the frame I'll put some weather stripping, some soft sponge type weather stripping to seal it up here. So yeah, that's my plan. Do it here, here, and here. This will be the tricky one because it's so wide, 63 inches. But yeah, I think we can get that done. I think we're going to have a much warmer master bedroom or master bathroom here when I'm all done. As luck would have it, my first stop was the local lumberyard, where I walked in the door and I found a whole stack of these 1x12s, 8 foot long, for $4 a piece. So for 20 bucks, I picked up 5 of them, which is probably 2 boards more than I need. Now, since my window frames only should be about 2.5 inches wide, because that's all the space I have to work with around each window, I should be able to get 4 8-foot strips out of each 1x12. Plenty enough wood for the mistakes I know I'm going to make. This is good wood, ponderosa pine, good both sides. Yeah, there's some knottiness here that's going to render, a foot or a foot here and a foot there unusable. But for $4, that's good stuff. I'm ready to get started and get the cutting going and put this stuff together. All right, I'm pretty well set here. I'm making good progress with my wood. I've got my 30-inch cuts. I've got my 42-inch cuts. I've got my 53-inch cuts. The only thing left to do is to do the 65-inch cuts, which is for that wide window. Now, coming up with some 65-inch long pine here from this lot of ponderosa pine that was bargain price with all the knotty, gnarly stuff in it. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think I found some pieces that'll that will work where the knots are away from the edges. So I'm getting ready to make one of my last cuts. So once I finish these two pieces, then I think we turn our attention to doing the biscuit joiner, cutting the edges and putting in the biscuits and gluing and framing them up, and making good progress on the next step, which would be to actually lay down the barrier itself. So let's get these cuts done. See you on the other side. All right, my saws are cleaned up. My wood's almost all put away, but I wanted to remind you of one thing. When you're a homesteader, you don't let anything go to waste. I'm surrounded by scraps of wood here, and so I'm not about to let these things just go into the trash. Hey, we heat our house with wood, and so this is wood. These are BTUs, and so I can't imagine just throwing them away when they can produce some heat for the homestead. I'm a big fan of keeping scraps, not only because there's certain projects that you're going to be glad you kept one, although you got to find a fine balance. You don't want to be hoarding your scraps, but you just try to utilize all your resources to the maximum, and that doesn't mean throwing away perfectly good wood when you can use it somewhere else, even if that somewhere else is in the wood stove. Okay, I've got all of my boards cut to the right length, and I went ahead and painted them both sides with a couple coats. I wanted to do this first rather than to wait until I get them fully assembled, because it's easier to paint them here faster, and rather than waiting until they're fully assembled. So everything is now properly cut and properly painted. All I have to do is now is assemble them. But there's a little wrinkle here, because remember, I was going to put them together and assemble them with a biscuit joiner or a biscuit cutter. That's going to be a little problematic because my source for that biscuit cutter has dried up. I found another method, I think, and got some parts, and I think I'll walk you through how I'm going to do that, because it will probably do just the trick and be just as good. This is a jar of biscuits. Now, I know that they don't look near as tasty as the kind that would come out of Catherine's kitchen, nor would I want to smother this with gravy and have it for breakfast. But I got a better plan for these. These little wooden wafers are about 1/8 of an inch thick. This is what we call, or what we use for biscuit joining. And I'm going to do the T-bone style of joining these rather than angle these at 45. I think it'll be just as strong T-boning these as my frames rather than to do the 45 miter cut. But in order to get the biscuit where it needs to go, that's where a biscuit joiner comes in handy. What that does, and which I can't use, is it cuts the groove in here perfectly for this biscuit to slide into halfway. And then you put another cut in the wood right where you want the two to join, just as deep, and it makes a nice snug fit with this biscuit providing the strength of that union rather than just glue and screws or whatever, which is not going to be very strong. All right, I went out and got the smallest router bit I could to help make the grooves in which the biscuits can fit in, since I don't have that biscuit joiner. It's a 3/8 inch router bit. Now, these biscuits are 1/8 inch thick, so it's going to have a little bit of play in there, but I think with the glue will be okay. And then I set it up and did some test cuts before I started working on the actual pieces that I've pre-cut and painted, just to make sure that this process is going to work. Now you can see my test cut looks pretty good. A biscuit will almost fit in here, but you can tell it's just a little too wide. So the ends of this football are going to have to get cut off. I don't really want a groove cut in here from end to end, because I'll lose some strength. I don't want just a little sliver here of support at the end. So instead of making this groove wide enough to accommodate this full biscuit, I'm going to shorten the biscuit lengthwise so that it fits into a groove that's not quite as wide. So I did a little test here, and I created two grooves in opposite ends of pieces of wood, and I put the biscuit in with some glue and just kind of sandwiched them together. Now, this is not the configuration my frames are going to be. They're going to be teed in, but I wanted to just to test the strength of this concept to see if it would work. And you know, this joint is really quite strong. I can't imagine this breaking apart in the heavy winds or even the annual putting up and taking down, installation and removal of these frames over time. So I think I've got a pretty good design and a pretty good process going. So the next thing I have to do is go to the pre-finished, pre-cut, pre-painted pieces of wood with my router and carefully create the grooves for each piece and get them glued together and clamped overnight. So let's get working on that. All right, I've made good progress here. I've got my biscuits cut down to size. I've already glued them in. All of the corners have been cut and the biscuits included, glued in, and I've clamped around the edges. This is the last frame and the largest frame, so I'm ready to undo these pipe clamps. You can see here in the middle that I had another type of device to keep things tight because I only had 2 pipe clamps. So I just used some rope and used a random piece of wood here to create tension that I can now just simply undo, and we'll unleash all of this. So let's see how the glue is holding up. It worked quite well on the prior frames, the glue and the biscuits. So let's see how this one works. All right, I'm really happy with the outcome here. These corners are really strong. This is a nice solid frame. The biscuits have done good work, and good glue too has helped a lot. So I think the next step is then to get ready to put the film on. Now, I was fortunate enough to find a good film at my local Walmart. This is 4 mil thick. It's clear plastic. And there's enough here on one roll, barely enough, I think. I might run short, but barely enough to do all my 3 frames. This is a good, sturdy, flexible film. The only thing I wonder is how I should install it, how I should attach it to my frames. Because if I just staple it, I'm afraid I'm going to create some puncture holes that are just going to be a place for the whole thing to tear once there's some stress on it. So I'm experimenting with some glue, some hot glue. And maybe that will provide us a strong enough bond so that I don't have to actually puncture through. Now, luckily, we had on hand 2 different types of hot glue guns. One is a low heat hot glue and one is a high heat hot glue. I was worried about the high heat actually melting this flexible vinyl fabric or vinyl film. So I did a little test on a small strip of wood. Half of it was secured to the wood with the high heat hot glue. Half of it was secured with the low heat. All right, now that the glue has set up and cooled down, let's see how our test performs with the low and the high heat glue. Oh. Wow, I am very impressed. Both the high and the low heat glue seem to be bonding pretty well. I think either one of these might work. And here with the high heat, I am not seeing any melting because of the temperature on any of this vinyl. So since I've got more sticks of high heat glue than I do the low heat, I think this might be how we adhere the vinyl to the wood. But one further test here, I know that these frames are going to be exposed to freezing temperatures and well below. So in order to see if this method works, I put the strip of test wood with the film on it and both glue types into the freezer overnight. Now I can see if that hot glue gun, either one of these, will will not just hold it at room temperature, ambient temperature, but will also hold it in the dead of winter when temperatures get well below freezing. So let's go take a look and see what it looks like in the freezer. All right, let's see what the results of our test are. There it is, right between the pork chops and the chicken. There's our test strip. Let's take it in the workshop where there's better light and we'll see what it looks like. All right, the test result is, oh, wow. When this is at cold temperatures, it completely loses its adhesion, its adherence to the wood. That came off so easily. All right, so clearly I can use the high heat glue or low heat glue for to adhere it, but it's not going to last for throughout the winter. It's only going to adhere until it gets cold. So, you know, I guess that's why we run tests, right? So I'll probably still use it just as an extra thing, but I'm going to have to rely mostly on the pressure of my furring strip on top of this. I'm not going to staple, but I will caulk on both sides of the furring strip. I think that'll give me a nice tight seal that will last when even the winds get really strong. All right, I've got 2 frames assembled already, and you can see my composite material here on the outside of the wooden frame. It sandwiches this film between it and the wooden frame itself using drywall screws, 1 1/4 inch drywall screws. Now I did go ahead and put a bead of hot glue down first to secure the film. Even though that hot glue does not hold at sub-zero temperatures, it at least at room temperature allowed me to stretch this fabric, stretch this vinyl, and make it nice and tight before I applied my composite sandwich here. I've also put a bead of caulk here at the top on all sides, just in case that bead of hot glue creates an area for wind to go through. So I'm blocking the wind here, securing the vinyl here. And I put another bead of caulk here on the inside because I know that that hot glue is not going to hold. I think this composite material with the 1/4 inch drywall screws is going to hold, but I know at sub-zero temperatures that hot glue is going to let go. So this bead of caulk here provides another level of adhesion of the film to the wood. Now what I used was elastomeric sealant. Now this is not your basic cheapo silicone latex caulk. It's elastomeric. That means it allows for some flexibility. So should the wind buffet this or should the material itself shrink in cold temperatures, this seal will flex as well a little bit and perhaps prevent any tearing at this interface. Now this last frame poses a bit of a challenge because it's so big, 62 inches from left to right, still the 53 from top to bottom, but the problem is the width of my window film doesn't allow for one piece, nor do I trust that one 4-sided square is going to be sufficient support for a size for a window that big. So I've cut a third piece that I'm going to mount here right in the middle for support, number 1, and number 2 to provide another surface upon which to secure 2 sections of film. Now to make sure that this interface doesn't leak or rip, what I'm going to do is bind it here with probably not hot glue, but maybe double-sided tape. I'm going to try that as an experiment on both sides. And then I'm going to come along here with another piece of composite material to provide the pressure, the support, and the anchor here in another way using those 1 1/4 inch drywall screws. And then of course I'll come along and I'll caulk on both sides. So there's 3 levels of attachment here. All right, I've got all three frames assembled. They look great. I've got the weather stripping around the outside. These vinyl coverings are nice and tight. I've got the composite tightly anchored in on the outside of the frame. I'm ready to install these and get these up on the window. Here it is, the middle of November. It's time. I've got to get these in place today before the winds start blowing and the snow starts flying and makes it almost impossible to put them up. So I can see if this is going to be the solution to a perpetually cold bathroom in our master bedroom. So I'm going to anchor these with 4 drywall screws, and it'll make a nice tight fit all the way around, and then we're just going to let the winter wind blow and see what happens. All right, that's a fix. All 3 windows now have another layer of wind protection. Now that's double pane Andersons, along with a 3rd pane of 4mm plastic in some tightly sealed frames attached to the exterior. If that doesn't solve my problem and give me a warmer bathroom in the winter, well then in the spring we're just gonna have to look and see what other contributors might be. So until then, I hope your winter is warm, and I hope your bathroom is too. Until we have another project, that's it for now from Homestead in the Woods.